Imagine a very small island. It is so small, even smaller than New York City. This island has almost no natural resources. It does not have much fresh water. It does not have oil or gold in its land. Yet today, this tiny place is one of the richest nations on Earth. People call it the little red dot because it looks tiny on a world map. This amazing place is Singapore. How did this happen? The story starts with great sadness and challenge. In the year 1965, Singapore faced a huge problem. Its bigger neighbor, Malaysia, forced Singapore to leave. This meant Singapore became an independent country, but not by choice. Its first leader, Lee Kuan Yew, felt very sad. He even cried on television. He believed Singapore would not survive alone. Back then, many people were poor. Many lived in simple, crowded homes, and jobs were hard to find. The future for this new nation looked very dark. But in just one short lifetime, Singapore is now a bright and rich city. It has many tall buildings and busy ports. Today, it is a place full of millionaires. Can you believe it? About 1 out of every 25 people living in Singapore has a lot of money. This is a very big difference from the past. How did a small country, once left alone and thought to fail, become such a powerful economic giant? How did it grow so strong and rich with almost nothing to start with? This book will show you the secret behind this change.
We will uncover the special plan or blueprint that Singapore followed. This plan turned the little red dot into what many people call the most overpowered country in Asia. We will explore how its leaders made very smart and sometimes difficult choices. We will learn how a nation built its wealth from almost nothing. Get ready to discover the incredible journey of Singapore, from a weeping leader's deep fear to a modern city's great success. 2. A very hard start. Singapore's journey began with a very difficult start. After many years under British rule, the country joined Malaysia in 1963. Lee Kuan Yew was Singapore's first prime minister. He thought joining Malaysia was the best way for the small island to survive. However, Singapore was different from the rest of Malaysia. Most people in Singapore were Chinese, while Malaysia had more Malays. This caused many problems and tensions between the two groups. In 1964, there were race riots in Singapore. Malaysia's Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman, worried about Singapore's growing power. So in 1965, a very unusual thing happened. Malaysia decided to force Singapore out. Singapore did not want to be independent. It was pushed out. Many people saw this forced independence as a death sentence for the small nation. Life in Singapore was very hard then. The island was small and crowded, with almost 2 million people living in a very small space. There was not much land available to build new homes or businesses.
Inside the country, people were divided. High racial tensions existed between the different groups, like the Chinese, Malays, and Tamils, who called the island home. There was no shared sense of being one nation, no strong patriotism for a new country called Singapore. The economy was in trouble. The unemployment rate was high, affecting about 14% of all workers. Many people were uneducated. About half of the population could not read or write well. A large number, about 1/3 of all residents, lived in poor, overcrowded slums, often without proper homes. Singapore had absolutely zero natural resources of any kind. This meant no oil, no valuable minerals, and no large forests to use for wood. Most critically, the island had no natural fresh water. It had to depend on buying nearly all its drinking water from Malaysia, the very country that had just forced it to leave. Singapore also had to import almost all of its energy, like fuel and electricity, from other places. The island's roads and buildings were still heavily damaged from the fighting during World War II. To make things worse, the British Navy, which had been a big source of jobs and money with its large base, had already left Singapore. Singapore was left completely on its own, with many serious problems inside. Outside, its neighbors were not friendly. To the north was Malaysia, which had just expelled them. To the south was Indonesia, a large and sometimes aggressive country.
Both nations had far more people and resources. For many people in Singapore, being independent seemed like a death sentence, where survival was almost impossible. But Lee Kuan Yew and his team were determined. Lee famously said that in a world where big fish eat small fish and small fish eat shrimps, then Singapore must become a poisonous shrimp to survive. This meant that Singapore, though tiny, had to be dangerous and smart to protect itself and thrive. Lee Kuan Yew and his team understood that Singapore had almost no natural wealth, but it did have a strategic location at the entrance to the Strait of Malacca, a vital sea lane for world trade. It also had its people, a dense urban population ready to work. Lee knew that the only way to build an economy was to attract as much foreign investment as possible. But how could they do this? How do you build a strong economy with nothing to sell? This was the huge problem Singapore faced right at the start. 3. Strict rules. Singapore's leaders knew they needed a special plan to grow after their difficult start. They decided to run the country almost like a strict company, not a typical democracy. The main goal was to attract money from foreign businesses. To make Singapore appealing, the government made taxes very low for both companies and people. It also made business rules very simple. This meant it was easy to start and run a company there. Singapore is often ranked as one of the easiest places in the world to do business. To keep foreign money safe, Singapore needed great stability. The government limited public protests and worker strikes. Labor unions had strict rules and had to register with the government. Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's first prime minister, led the country for over 3 decades until 1991. His People's Action Party, or PAP, has stayed in power since independence. This long period of one-party rule provided constant stability, making foreign investors feel secure. Limiting democracy, the government believed, was necessary for this predictable environment. The PAP government also had a very strong policy against corruption, zero tolerance. Officials found corrupt faced harsh punishments, even execution. They also received very good salaries. This system aimed to remove any reason for government workers to take bribes. Another key part of this strict system was tough laws against crime, especially drug use. Leaders feared crime and drugs could make the country seem unstable, scaring away foreign investment. So Singapore adopted a very strict approach. Even today, it uses the death penalty for some serious crimes, particularly drug trafficking. Visitors arriving by plane get a clear warning. Bringing illegal drugs into Singapore can lead to execution by hanging. This policy has drawn criticism, with some calling Singapore Disneyland with the death penalty.
All these policies had a clear goal: to create a politically stable, crime-free, and corruption-free environment. They aimed for low taxes and simple business rules. This was all to attract as much foreign investment as possible.
The plan was for Singapore to not just survive, but to truly thrive, using its good location and manufactured stability. These strict rules meant fewer civil liberties for people in Singapore compared to many other countries. They could not protest freely or easily create new political parties. However, the country became much richer and safer. The government believed people would accept fewer political rights for good jobs and a secure future. This makes us wonder, would you trade your civil liberties for guaranteed wealth and a very safe life? 4. Homes for people. Singapore's leaders knew they needed their people to be loyal and happy. So they started big plans to make sure everyone had a good place to live. This was a key part of building the new country. The government created a special group called the Housing Development Board, or HDB. HDB made a very important decision. They bought almost all the land in Singapore. This was about 90% of the country's land. They bought it for prices below the normal market value. Then HDB started building many new apartment buildings. This helped solve a big problem because many people lived in crowded areas or simple shelters. The idea was to give every person a home. This would make people feel like they had a real part in the country's future. Lee Kuan Yew, the first prime minister, believed that owning a home would bring people together and make them feel united. Singapore had people from different backgrounds, like Chinese, Malay, and Tamil groups. To help these groups live together in peace, HDB used special rules for housing. Each new apartment building had people from these different communities. This encouraged people to live side by side and understand each other better, creating a sense of community. The government made it easy for people to buy these HDB apartments. They sold them with 99-year leases at prices lower than what the market would usually ask. They also gave money to people who were buying their first home to help them afford it. Another big plan was the Central Provident Fund, or CPF. This was a program where all workers had to save a part of their monthly pay, at least 20%. People could use this saved money from their CPF to make a first payment on an HDB apartment. They could also use it to help pay their monthly housing costs. Because of these plans, a very high number of people in Singapore own their homes. Around 88% of all homes are lived in by their owners. This is much higher than in many other countries. These programs made citizens loyal and gave the government strong support.
Beyond housing, the government also focused on making sure people were educated and healthy. They built a very good public education system to train skilled workers. They also created a strong healthcare system to keep everyone well. To make life easy, a world-class public transport system was built. It connected homes to workplaces and shopping areas, reducing traffic and the need for expensive cars. Cars in Singapore are made very costly with taxes and fees. All these policies helped create a stable and productive workforce. This stability and the skilled workers attracted more businesses from around the world to invest in Singapore. These careful plans were key to Singapore's success and growth. 5. Ships and planes. Singapore found a special way to become rich by using its location. It sits next to the Strait of Malacca. This is a very important sea passage, like a narrow road for ships. It is the shortest way for ships to go between countries in East Asia, like China, and countries in Europe or the Middle East.
Many ships that carry oil, natural gas, and factory goods use this route. About 1/3 of all crude oil and natural gas moved by sea goes through the Strait of Malacca. Also, about 30% of all global trade, worth around $3.5 trillion each year, passes through this strait. This makes it a very busy and important place for world trade. From its early days, Singapore worked hard to be the best place for ships to stop and trade.
The government made rules that were good for businesses, and it kept taxes low. This helped the port of Singapore become very popular. Today, it is one of the busiest ports in the world. It is number one for something called transshipment. This means goods arrive on one ship, then they are moved to another ship or even a plane, and then sent to their final destination. This way of moving goods is very fast and efficient. It helps global trade run smoothly. Every year, about 1/5 of all big shipping containers in the world pass through Singapore's port. Singapore also became known as the world's gas station and a top oil refiner, even though it has no oil in its own ground. How did this happen? Because so many ships pass through the Strait of Malacca, they always need fuel. Singapore saw this chance. It built large oil refineries and storage places. Big oil companies like ExxonMobil and Shell, along with Singapore's own company, have huge refineries there. Singapore refines about 1.4 million barrels of crude oil every day. It turns this into fuels like gasoline and special diesel for ships. Because most people in Singapore use public transport, the country does not need all the fuel it makes, so it sells most of it to ships passing by. This has made Singapore the biggest refueling port for ships and the 5th largest exporter of refined oil products in the world. Singapore also built a modern airport called Changi International Airport. It opened in 1981. The government made sure the airport had many good services and nice places for travelers. This was to attract people flying between East Asia, Australia, India, and Europe to stop in Singapore. Changi Airport became a major hub for passengers and cargo by air. It also helps the seaport by making it easy for ship crews to arrive and leave from all over the world. After building a strong foundation in trade and oil, Singapore moved to making more valuable goods. With its highly educated workers, the country attracted companies that make advanced products. These include computer chips, electronics, medicines, and industrial machines. This shift created more skilled jobs and brought in more wealth. It shows how Singapore used its good location and smart planning to become a leader in trade and technology. Lots of money. Singapore has gathered an amazing amount of money. This wealth helps the country stay strong and stable. Much of this money is held in special funds called sovereign wealth funds. These funds act like huge savings accounts for the entire nation. They invest money around the world, making more money for Singapore. This careful management of finances is a key reason for Singapore's success. Two of the biggest funds are Temasek Holdings and the GIC. Temasek Holdings manages assets that are worth about $630 billion. The GIC fund is even larger, looking after assets estimated at around $769 billion. Also, the Central Provident Fund, which helps citizens save, holds about $397 billion. This shows the vast financial power that Singapore has built. When we combine the value of these three funds, Singapore's total assets are nearly $1.8 trillion. This huge amount is more than 3 times the country's yearly economic output. To understand how much this is, imagine sharing it. If this money were divided equally among all 6 million people living in Singapore today, each person would receive approximately $300,000. This is a truly remarkable national inheritance that the government has created for its citizens over many decades. For a long time, Hong Kong was known as Asia's top financial city. But in recent years, this has changed. Hong Kong faced political issues, which caused some businesses and investors to worry about the future. They looked for safer places to keep their money and invest. Singapore, with its reputation for being very stable and having clear laws, became a top choice. Because of this, a lot of money and investments moved from Hong Kong to Singapore. This shift in money helped Singapore become an even stronger financial center. In 2017, financial firms in Hong Kong managed more money than those in Singapore.
But by 2023, Singapore had taken the lead. Now, Singapore manages over $4.1 trillion in assets, while Hong Kong manages around $3.99 trillion. As a result, Singapore is now seen as the most important financial hub in Asia. It is also ranked as the third most significant financial center in the world, after New York City and London. Singapore's ability to attract and manage such vast wealth has cemented its status as a true financial fortress in the global economy. This strong financial base provides great security for the country's future. 7. A strong army. Singapore is a very small country, but it has one of the strongest armies in the world for its size. You could say it is the most militarized country per square kilometer. This means it has many soldiers, tanks, planes, and ships packed into a small area. This strong military is like a hidden iron fist, protecting the country's success. It shows that Singapore is ready to defend itself and its wealth. One big reason for this strong army is Singapore's need for water. The country does not have enough fresh water for its people, so it buys much of its water from Malaysia, its larger neighbor. This is a source of worry for Singapore. There have been times when Malaysia has threatened to stop the water supply or raise prices. This fear, sometimes called the water war anxiety, makes Singapore want to be very strong. The agreement for water supply with Malaysia will end in 2061, which adds to the concern. Because Singapore is so small, if there was a conflict, it would need to act very fast. All men in Singapore must serve 2 years in the army. This creates a large group of trained soldiers ready to fight if needed. However, calling up many workers for a long time would hurt the economy. So Singapore needs to win any conflict quickly to protect its businesses and foreign investments. To do this, Singapore has bought many advanced weapons. It has 170 modern tanks, which is 3 times more than Malaysia has. It also has many armored vehicles for its soldiers. To put this in perspective, Singapore, a country of only 6 million people, has more tanks than the entire United Kingdom. Singapore also has a very modern air force. It uses American-made F-16 and F-15 fighter jets. Soon, it will also get F-35 fighter jets, which are very advanced. This will make Singapore the first country in Southeast Asia to have them. With these planes, Singapore's air force is as big as Malaysia's and Indonesia's combined. This helps Singapore control the skies if there is a conflict. The Navy is also very strong. Singapore has 6 modern submarines from Germany and Sweden, with 2 more coming soon. When they arrive, Singapore will have more submarines than Malaysia and Indonesia together. It also has many advanced frigates and other ships. This makes Singapore's navy one of the most powerful in Southeast Asia, even compared to much larger countries like Australia. Singapore spends a lot of money on its military, about $15 billion each year. This is more than both Malaysia and Indonesia spend together. This high spending helps Singapore be known as the most heavily militarized country per square kilometer in the world. This power helps to stop other countries from even thinking about attacking Singapore. Finally, this strong military does more than just prepare for war. It is an insurance policy. It tells foreign investors that their money and businesses in Singapore are physically safe. It helps create a very secure place for global companies to invest, knowing that their capital is protected from any threats, both from inside and outside the country. This security is key to Singapore's continuing success. 8. The future. Singapore has grown from a poor island to a rich and modern city. But now it faces its greatest challenge, the growing tension between the United States and China. Singapore must be very careful, balancing its strong ties with both powerful nations. China is a huge part of Singapore's success. Most of the oil and gas that China buys from the Middle East passes right by Singapore. Also, many Chinese goods going to Europe travel through Singapore's busy port. About 3/4 of Singapore's people are of ethnic Chinese background. Studies show that many Singaporeans feel friendly towards China. China and Hong Kong have invested around $156 billion in Singapore, showing a big economic link. On the other side, the United States is also vital for Singapore. American companies have put even more money into Singapore, about $428 billion. These companies provide jobs for over 200,000 people in Singapore. Singapore even allows the U.S. military to use its naval and air bases, like Changi Naval Base. This helps American ships and planes work in the region, keeping trade routes safe. Big global companies from both China and the U.S., like TikTok and Apple, have their main offices for the region in Singapore. This creates a difficult situation for Singapore. It tries to stay neutral, but if the U.S. and China start a serious conflict, for example over Taiwan, Singapore might be forced to pick a side. This would be a very hard choice. If Singapore supports U.S. actions against China, Chinese money could leave the country quickly, greatly hurting Singapore's economy. But if Singapore does not cooperate with the U.S., America could stop Singapore's access to the U.S. dollar financial system. This system is the backbone of Singapore's banks and would cause huge economic damage. Singapore became powerful during a time of global peace and open trade. It went from a small, helpless place to a leading city because goods and money could move freely around the world. The idea of the poisonous shrimp helped Singapore survive and grow when it was small and weak. But can this clever poisonous shrimp survive when the two biggest whales, the United States and China, begin to fight? The future of globalization is uncertain, and this is the biggest danger for Singapore. The next 60 years will truly test Singapore's ability to keep its success. What do you think? Can Singapore keep its unique success story going in a world where the two biggest powers are increasingly at odds?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.